Failure is essentially irrelevant unless it is catastrophic.
It's only a failure if you quit.
The most important mistake I see smart people making is assuming that they're smart.
Rise and shine, it's espresso time. Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I am not a morning person, I'm not. But when you start your day off with a powerful routine that inspires you for success, like watching one of these videos, it will change your life. So let's start your day off right together. Grab your coffee, know that I believe in you, and get ready for a shot of espresso from Elon Musk.
I wake up every morning.
Espresso keep me going.
I wake up every morning.
Let's go back to failure for a minute and the mindset that you and your leadership team at Tesla and SpaceX have on failure. I mean, the SpaceX blooper reel that you guys did in, I think it was 2017 timeframe, was definitely, hey, we embrace this learning that occurs. More recently with the Tesla truck and the ball through the window, also that mindset, that mindset that embraces failure. How do you personally, I mean, those kinds of failures would drive a lot of us in this room nuts, but doesn't seem to drive you nuts. Seems like you're very comfortable with it. Can you talk about the mindset that requires for you to be that accepting of that kind of failure?
Sure. Should we roll the video?
No.
Or, should we not?
No, we should not roll the video. Not yet.
Okay. Well, I think of these things as just there's a certain amount of time, and within that time, you want the best net outcome. So, for all the set of actions that you can do, there's going to be some of which will fail, some of which will succeed, and you want the net useful output of your set of actions to be the highest. I have to use a baseball analogy. Baseball, they don't let you just sit there and wait for the perfect pitch until you get a real easy one. They can give you 3 shots, and the third one, they say, okay, and they get off and they go back to put somebody else up there. So you 3 strikes on baseball, not on bat anymore. So what you're really looking for is what's the batting average? How you doing on score, and just there's going to be some amount of failure, but you want your net output. Net useful output to be maximized. Failure is essentially irrelevant unless it is catastrophic.
It's only a failure if you quit. It's only a failure if you stop. It's only a failure if you throw in a towel and say, I'm done. If you still love it and you give up, that's when it's a failure. Otherwise, it's a speed bump. Otherwise, it's a learning opportunity. Otherwise, it's motivation to help you keep going. As long as you love doing it, you have to keep going. The biggest potential failure that I had was when I quit on my business partner. I was I was 19, 20. I was struggling in my company, seeing no results, pouring just so much into my company every day and not getting any traction, anything. We were not winning. And you have those moments where you just feel like you're not valuable anymore. It's one thing if you're working and you're getting results, but when you're working and not getting results, you get really frustrated. If you're not working and you're not getting results, you can say, okay, that's fine. There's lots of things I didn't work hard at and I didn't get results, so it's fine. But when you're working hard every day and just not seeing results, I think there's only so long that you can last before you start to feel really bad about yourself. And so I quit on my business partner, and I couldn't believe that I said those words. I couldn't believe that I was saying I quit on something that I cared so deeply about. And I cried, and cried and cried and cried and barely slept that night and decided the next day, I can't quit yet. I can't quit yet. I just have to find another way to stand. I had the words of Oprah in my head saying, you have to find another way to stand. Don't quit. And that's what led me to modeling success. And that's what led me to building my business and making that first sale, to then selling the whole business, to then launching my website and launching my YouTube channel. The frustration and the negativity and the low of saying I quit, leading to the worst moment of my life, feeling like a total piece of garbage as a human, then led to the greatest breakthrough of all time for me, which was to model success. It forced me to think of, well, I can't keep doing it the way I'm doing it. I can't keep going like this because this obviously is not working. I have to find another way to stand. Maybe I'm not the first guy to try to figure this out. In that moment of desperation, I asked that question. Maybe I'm not the first guy to figure this out. Who has done this? And in modeling Bill Gates, that saved my company, and I've been doing it for the last 20 years now, modeling success. Finding the people who have done the thing that I want to do, done the things that you want to do, and sharing their lessons. So it's not only a speed bump, that failure, that setback of me saying I quit actually led to the greatest breakthrough of all time for Evan Carmichael, the human. The lowest moment in my life led to the greatest moment of all time, the greatest insight, the greatest unlock of all time. Failure is only real failure if you quit, if you give up, and you throw in the towel on the thing that you care about. So how do we start to move through it? How do you start to see those rejections and those failures as just road bumps or potential catapults forward? Well, a couple things, 3 ideas. Number 1, start small. Where so many entrepreneurs get it wrong is you try to go big out of the gate. I love dreaming big. Dream big is great. That's going to keep you motivated, inspired, energetic, willing to chase down your goals. Dream big, yes, forever. And act small. Start small. Find a small way to start right now today. That huge idea that you've got. What's the fastest path that's inside of your big vision that can get you to some revenue? That can get you to some cash flow? What's the fastest path to do that? That's in alignment still with your big mission. So often entrepreneurs just try to go big too soon. And you take out the mortgage on the house, or you spend your entire life savings on this new idea, and if it doesn't work, then you're a failure. Then you have no other options. You have no plan B. You have no shot to actually go and turn another company around. Where what you want to do is find the smallest possible way to get started and just start. Just start, because your perfect plan isn't going to be perfect. If you mortgage your home and take out a giant loan to launch your first business and you've never done it before, you're probably going to make tons of mistakes. And any of those mistakes might sink the company because they're big mistakes. But if you're starting small, any one little mistake is just a little mistake. It doesn't sink the company, it doesn't sink your idea, and you're still able to show up for another day. So whatever your big idea is, start small. Dream big, act small. The smallest possible way from your idea to just take one little step forward today, and another the next day, and another the next day. You flip that thinking, you'll start to see a lot more momentum in your business. Number 2, expect to fail at the beginning. Expect to fail. This is another big reason why entrepreneurs don't win and don't stay on it, because they expect it to be great out of the gate. I've got a great idea. I want to serve. I think it's going to help a lot of people. Boom, this is a winning idea. And then when it doesn't work right away, you get frustrated because the expectations that you had for how well it would do not actually line up to the results. At the beginning, expect to fail. Expect everything to go wrong. When I make a video, expect to suck. I tell people this inside my Movement Makers program, where I'm training people to be thought leaders. We have a 100 video challenge where I want you to make 100 videos before you tell yourself that you suck. Because what ends up happening is you may not think you're going to be great. You know, you're not going to be some amazing superstar in front of the camera the first time out, but you expect to be decent. And then you film yourself and you watch it back and you realize, wow, I'm way worse than I ever thought I was going to be. Have you had that experience? You thought you were going to be maybe not world class, but you thought you were going to be pretty good. And then you do the thing and you're just way, way, way worse. You go ice skating or riding the bike or snowboarding or something, and you think, okay, it doesn't look that hard, and you get on and you're falling all over the place. Have you had that experience? The problem is then people quit too soon. So why we have 100 video challenges, before you quit and say that you suck at video and it's just not meant for you and it's not the thing that you should be doing, do 100 videos and see yourself get better. And people are already commenting after the 5th video, the 10th video, the 20th video, the 30th video, how much they've already grown and learned and improved and gotten better, and look back on their first video and say, wow, that was so bad, but look how much I've already grown. When you expect to be great out of the gate and you're not, then people never want to show up again. You never want to do it again. But when you expect to suck and then you do suck and you're a little bit better every day, it gives you the permission to fail. And it gives you the permission to show up again and fail a little bit less, because all you're really missing is momentum. And then tip number 3 is find another way to stand. The classic advice from Oprah Winfrey that saved my business and might save yours as well is, if you really, really love doing it and it's just not working out, find another way to stand. Find another way to keep going. Find another way to do something. Model the success of somebody who's come before you. Ask for help. Share your story. Find another way to stand. Because if you quit now, if you quit and you don't love it, that's fine. You should quit. If you don't love something, I think a lot of entrepreneurs stay in a business, stay in a relationship, stay in something for too long, just out of expectations, and they actually stopped loving it 2 years ago. You should have quit a long time ago. If you don't love it, quit right now, immediately. That's not a failure. The failure is staying in this thing that you don't love, because you'll never do great work inside of something that you don't love. But if you still love it, if you still get excited by it, if you still enjoy the process, if you still want to do this thing and see it through and serve people and make the impact that you know you're capable of having, if that's still inside you and you quit today, you're going to regret that decision for the rest of your life. You're going to look back on your life at this moment and say, I wish I gave it one more day. I wish I gave it one more week. I wish I gave it one more month. I wish I just gave it a little bit more. I had it in me. I could have done it, and I didn't, because I was afraid, because I was tired, because I was fed up. And now I regret not taking my shot. I had a chance. I had my shot back then, and I didn't do it. Don't be that person. If you still love it, if you still are addicted to it, you still want to have that impact that you know you're capable of having inside this business, don't quit. Just find a different way to stand. Now I've got some special bonus clips that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you just watch a video and you get motivated, the sign says you have a 35% chance of actually following through. That's not good enough, Believe Nation. We need to take some action. But when you watch a video, you get motivated and you create a specific plan of action, that number jumps from 35% to 91% chance of you following through. And when you publicly commit to other people, like leaving a comment down in this video, your number jumps to 95% chance of you actually following through on the plan you set for yourself. So I want to know your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week. Leave it down in the comments below so I can celebrate you.
Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, the science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action for the habit to stick. And that's what I want for you. So I've designed a custom free program where I'm going to send you an unlisted video for the next 254 days to shift your confidence and belief forward. The link to join is in the description below.
There are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough that you do it in spite of the fear. That ended up being worse than if we had designed a car from the beginning. When you want to do something new, you have to apply the physics approach. The most important mistake I see smart people making is assuming that they're smart. They're not.
Yeah. So give me an example, what animals or things that a human being made that is smarter than human beings?
Well, computers actually are already much smarter than people on so many dimensions. We just keep moving the goalposts. So we used to think, like, for example, being good at chess was an example of a smart human. And then Kasparov was crushed by Deep Blue in '97. That was a long time ago. 22 years. I mean, right now your cell phone could crush the world champion at chess, literally. Go used to be thought of as something that humans were better at than computers. Then Lee Sedol was beaten 4-1 by AlphaZero. Then a new version of AlphaZero, sorry, I should say AlphaGo. AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol 4-1. Then there's AlphaZero. AlphaZero crushed AlphaGo 100-0. Now it's just pointless because it just keeps playing itself. Humans are trying to play a computer Go is like trying to fight Zeus. It's not going to work. Hopeless. We're hopelessly inadequate. In terms of rendering, basically, there's just a smaller and smaller corner of intellectual pursuits that humans are better than computers, and that every year it gets smaller and smaller, and soon we will be far, far surpassed in every single way, guaranteed. 100%. Or civilization will end. Those are the two possibilities. I think it's also important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. So the normal way that we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. We're doing this because it's like something else that was done, or it's like what other people are doing.
Me Too type ideas.
Yeah, slight iterations on a theme, and it's kind of mentally easier to reason by analogy rather than from first principles. But by first principles is kind of a physics way of looking at the world, and what that really means is you kind of boil things down to the most fundamental truths, and say, okay, what are we sure is true, or as sure as possible is true, and then reason up from there. That takes a lot more mental energy.
Give me an example of that. Like, what's one thing that you've done that on that you feel has worked for you?
Sure. So somebody could say, in fact, people do, that battery packs are really expensive, and that's just the way they'll always be, because that's the way they've been in the past. You're like, well, no, that's pretty dumb. 2008 in particular was awful because we had the third launch failure in a row of our Falcon 1 vehicle at SpaceX, the Tesla financing round that we were raising fell apart because the economy was going through tailspin, and it's pretty hard to raise money for a startup car company. Late 2008 when GM and Chrysler are busy going bankrupt. That was tough. And then Solar City had a deal with Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Stanley had to renege on the deal because they themselves were running out of money. So it looked like all three companies were going to die, and I was also going through a divorce. So that was definitely a low point.
So it's 2008. You're going through a divorce, which, like some, to borrow your word, douchebag bloggers are writing about to make even worse.
Right. Yes, that's true. In addition to all that stuff happening, I was getting dumped on massively in the press.
Right.
Yeah.
It looks like all three companies are going to fail. I mean, why do you keep going with all three? Like, I feel like even a lot of great entrepreneurs in that situation would have been like, I've already sunk everything I have in these companies, and I got to pick one. But you didn't. I mean, you kept doing all three. Why?
That was a very tough call. At the end of 2008, that was probably one of the toughest calls I've had to make, because I could either reserve capital for one company or the other. I mean, fortunately, Solar City didn't need a ton of capital, so they were okay. But between SpaceX and Tesla, it's sort of like if you've got two kids, and what do? Do you spend all your money to maximize the probability of success of one, or do you try to keep both alive?
In the beginning, nobody wanted a Tesla. I can tell you that. When we made the original sort of Roadster sports car, people were like, well, "Why would I want an electric car? My gasoline car works fine." I'm like, "No, electric car is better. I should try it." And it was hard to get people to do a test drive. First of all, nobody knew who we were. Never heard of this company. I'm like, "Yeah, we're named after Nikola Tesla. You know that guy?" Nope. So for sure we were doing push in the beginning because people said there was no one telling us that they wanted an electric car. So it was not out of like it's like lots of people coming up to me saying, hey, I really want an electric car. I heard that 0 times. So people were like, it's like, man, we better make an electric car and show that these things can be good, and then people will want them. It's like, I think it was like Henry Ford said that like when we're talking about the Model T, it's like if you asked the public what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse. Mm-hmm. So if you did like a big survey and said, hey, public, before automobiles, what would you like? It's like, well, I'd like my horse to go 3 miles an hour faster and eat less food and be stronger and live longer and that kind of thing. There'll all be basically a bunch of incremental improvements on horse. Because people, when you say like, well, what about an automobile, that car that drives itself? Like, what are you talking about? That sounds crazy. But when you actually make an automobile and give it to people and say, okay, now this is a horse where you can keep it in the barn, and if you leave for a month, it's still alive. Yeah. So carry more weight than a horse and go further and that kind of thing. So anyway, it's like when it's a radically new product, people don't know that they want it because it's just not in their scope. I think when they first started making TVs, they did a nationwide survey. I think this might have been like 46 or 48. It was like a famous nationwide survey. Will you ever buy a TV? Now, it was like 96% of respondents said no. Some crazy number. Like basically everyone's like, would you buy a TV? And maybe they put a price in there or something, I don't know. But it was famously, almost everyone said they would not buy a TV, but they didn't know what they're talking about.
So the big game-changing stuff at the beginning is a company push kind of a thing most of the time. But then changes to the product over time can be a lot more customer pull kind of a focus.
Yeah, changes to the product over time can be incremental changes. Then customers can certainly tell you, it's good to get customer feedback to say, how can we improve the product? And once they're using it, they can say, okay, I like this thing about it, I don't like this other thing, and then we can improve the product over time.
How much of your success do you attribute to having really audacious goals, or versus just not being focused on the short term, money coming in, or investors?
Unfortunately, one does have to be focused on the short term and money coming in when creating a company, because otherwise the company will die. So I think that a lot of times people think like creating a company is going to be fun. I would say it's not. It's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you have like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problem in the company, the most pernicious and painful problem. So I wouldn't say it's. I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it, and have a fairly high pain threshold. And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And there's some truth to that. The staring into the abyss part is that you're going to be constantly facing the extermination of the company. Because most startups fail. It's like 90%, arguably 99% of startups fail. So that's the staring into the abyss part. You're constantly saying, okay, if I don't get this right, the company will die. It can be quite stressful. And then the eating glass part is you've got to do the problems. You've got to work on the problems that the company needs you to work on, not the problems you want to work on. And so that's you end up working on problems that you'd really wish you weren't working on. And so that's the eating glass part. And that goes on for a long time.
Young people globally who want to be like Elon Musk. What's your advice to them?
I think that probably they shouldn't want to be.
You?
I think it sounds better than it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not as much fun being me as you'd think. I don't know.
You don't think so?
No. There's definitely, it could be worse for sure, but it's, I'm not sure I'm not sure I want to be me.
Okay.
But if, you know, I think advice, I mean, if you want to make progress in things, I think that the best analytical framework for understanding the future is physics. I'd recommend studying the thinking process around physics, like not the equations. I mean, the equations certainly they're helpful, but the way of thinking in physics is it's the best framework for understanding things that are counterintuitive. And you know, always taking the position that you're to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong over time. One of the biggest mistakes people generally make, and I'm guilty of it too, is wishful thinking. You know, like you want something to be true, even if it isn't true. And so you ignore the things that, you ignore the real truth because of what you want to be true. This is a very difficult trap to avoid. And like I said, certainly one that I find myself in having problems with. But if you just take that approach of you're always to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong, and solicit critical feedback, particularly from friends. Like friends, particularly friends, if somebody loves you, they want the best for you. They don't want to tell you the bad things. So you have to ask them, you know, and say, really, I really do want to know. and then they'll tell you.
When we I remember when you first told me that you were thinking about tunnels.
Yeah, when did I first tell you about that?
Years ago.
Okay, it's like a long time ago.
Yeah,
like,
I thought you were joking.
Yeah, it was. I was joking, but it's not because of some epiphany that I had one day driving down the 405. That's how it gets translated somehow. I was talking about tunnels for years and years. For probably 5 years or 4 years at least, whenever I'd give a talk and people would ask me about what opportunities do you see in the world, I'd say tunnels. Can someone please build tunnels? So after 4 or 5 years of begging people to build tunnels, and still no tunnels, I was like, okay, I want to build a tunnel. So like maybe I'm missing something here. So I was like basically talking people's ears off for tunnels for several years, and then said, well, let's find out what it takes to build a tunnel. And so I started digging a tunnel. I wanted to start the tunnel from where I could see it from my office at SpaceX. So I said, well, let's just carve off a part of the parking lot across the road so I can see if anything's happening or not. And then we named our first boring machine Godot, because I kept waiting for it. It never came. Finally it did. And we got it going. And now we're making good progress.
When did it occur to you that Zip2 might be a success?
Well, I mean, when we first started out, I think our ambitions were really quite low. It was really to make enough money to pay the rent.
Yeah, we got a VC give us money. That was,
yay!
Yeah. We thought it was all over then.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, when we started out in '95, we literally, at the beginning, we had one computer, which would be the web server during the day, and then at night, I'd program on it. And
we'd sleep in the office.
Yeah,
we couldn't afford to have an apartment.
It was cheaper to rent the office than to rent an apartment, so we just rented the office and slept in the office and showered at the YMCA.
Showered at the YMCA. And for me, the worst part was eating at Jack in the Box 3 times a day.
Yeah, man, this like
I'll sleep
it's really difficult to get food at Palo Alto after like 10 p.m. It's like Jack in the Box and a few other options. So we rotated through the Jack in the Box menu. Through the end of 95, where that's essentially we're just sleeping in the office and showering at the YMCA. And then around the end of 95 is when Netscape went public. And then whether or not somebody knew what the internet was, they knew that you could make money on the internet somehow, or even if it's only on the greater fool theory. So when we went and talked to venture capitalists in early 96, there was a much greater interest in what we were doing. In fact, the round closed in like maybe a week or something.
It was crazy. Yeah, we went from sleeping in the office to people throwing, I mean, again, this is a financial crowd, so you guys see these numbers every day, but for us to hear, we'll give you $3 million.
Yeah, that sounded extremely, we thought they were crazy. Like, why would they do that?
It was literally like, these people are insane.
They obviously do not realize we're sleeping in the office.
In fact, when they did fund us, they realized that we were illegal immigrants.
Well, I mean,
yes, we were.
I'd say it was a gray area.
Yeah, yes, we were. We were illegal immigrants. We were sleeping in the office. We didn't have a car. We had one car, but the wheel kept falling off.
But, well, actually, yeah, the wheel did actually fall off the car.
Yes, exactly. And the venture capitalists actually bought us cars.
Yeah, well, they gave us 40 grand.
It was 40 grand to go buy cars, which was, at the time was more money than we'd ever seen.
If you think of like, what is education? Like, you're basically downloading data and algorithms into your brain. And it's actually amazingly bad in conventional education, because like, it shouldn't be like this huge chore. So you're making it way better. But I mean, I think a lot of the things that I would say you've probably heard 100 times, and in fact are, if not doing, like the more you can gamify the process of learning, the better. Like for my kids, I do not have to encourage them to play video games.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I have to like pry them from their hands, like crack.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's like drop that crack needle.
Yeah, yeah. You have that problem at your house too.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
The crack is addictive.
Yeah. So it's it's to the degree that you can make somehow learning like a game, then it's better. And I think unfortunately, like a lot of education is very vaudevillian. You've got someone standing up there kind of lecturing at people, and they've done the same lecture 20 years in a row, and they're not very excited about it. And that lack of enthusiasm, is conveyed to the students. They're not very excited about it. They don't know why they're there. Like, why are we learning this stuff? We don't even know why. In fact, I think a lot of things people learn, probably there's no point in learning them. Because they never use them in the future.
Because who's going to launch a rocket into space? I mean, that's just like,
yeah,
exactly. That never happens.
Well, you have to say, like, people, I think, don't stand back and say, well, why are we teaching people these things? And we should tell them probably why we're teaching these things. Because a lot of kids are just in school kind of puzzled as to why they're there. And I think if you can explain the why of things, then that makes a huge difference to people's motivation. Then they understand purpose.
The real way I think you actually achieve intellectual property protection is by innovating fast enough. If your rate of innovation is high, then you don't need to worry about protecting the IP because other companies will be copying something that you did years ago. And that's fine, just make sure your rate of innovation is fast. Speed of innovation is what matters. And I do say this to my teams like quite a lot, that innovation per unit time, as I go innovation per year, if you want to say it, like is what matters, not innovation absent time. Because if you wanted to make, say, 100% improvement in something, and that took 100 years or 1 year, that's radically different. So it's like, what is your rate of innovation? That matters. And is the rate of innovation, is that accelerating or decelerating? And a weird thing happens when companies get big is that most companies or organizations, the bigger they get, they tend to get less innovative. Not just less innovative on a per person basis, but less innovative in the absolute. And I think this is probably because the incentive structure is not there for innovation. it's not enough to use words to encourage innovation. The incentive structure must be aligned with that. That's fundamental.
Okay, so you're CEO of 2 companies, you're chairman of Solar City. Talk about time management. How on earth do you do this?
Well,
do you get any sleep?
Yeah, sometimes not enough. Sleep is really great, because I find if I don't get enough sleep, then I'm quite grumpy. I mean, obviously, I think most people are that way. And also, like I try to sort of figure out what's the right amount of sleep, because I found I could drop below a certain threshold of sleep, and although I'd be awake more hours and I could sustain it, I would get less done because my mental acuity would be affected. So I found generally the right number for me is around 6 to 6.5 hours on average per night.
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
Right. And any other tips
on... That is an average, though.
Right. Any other tips on just managing to run 2 companies simultaneously? I mean, do you find, I mean, I know you're up here Monday, Tuesday. Is it all Tesla when you're up in Silicon Valley and all SpaceX Wednesday, Thursday?
Having a having a smartphone is incredibly helpful because that means you can do email during interstitial periods. Like if you're in a car, you're walking in the bathroom, everywhere. You can do email practically when you're awake. And so that's really helpful to have email for SpaceX and Tesla integrated on my phone. And then it's just you have to apply a lot of hours to actually working. So the way I generally do it is I'll be working at SpaceX on Monday, and then Monday night fly to the Bay Area, spend Tuesday and Wednesday in the Bay Area, then at Tesla, and then fly back on Wednesday night, spend Thursday and Friday at SpaceX. In the last several months, then I would fly back here on a Saturday and either spend Saturday and Sunday at Tesla or spend Saturday at Tesla and Sunday at SpaceX.
What motivations do people need to harness to try to make change as opposed to just reading about change? And that's not supposed to be an easy question. I don't think it's this.
Well, like I said, I think if you study engineering and you figure out how to design new things, then it's relatively easy to start a company. You just need to get a few like-minded people with you, and then focus on creating a compelling prototype as soon as possible. And then, there's a strong venture capital industry in this country that will give you funding to take things to the next level. And that's all there is to it. And you might, if you try it a few times, you may or may not succeed. But I think sometimes people fear starting a company too much. You have to say, really, what's the worst that could go wrong? You're not going to starve to death. You're not going to die of exposure. What's the worst that could go wrong?
Maybe I just blank out the word doubt. No, I mean, to be totally frank, I doubted us too. So I thought we, had maybe, when starting SpaceX, maybe had a 10% chance of reaching orbit. So to those who doubted us, I was like, well, I think you're probably right. I mean, the number of times that I was told, like, because I was taking the money that I earned from PayPal and rolling it into to create SpaceX and Tesla, and I ended up spending it all. It wasn't the intention, but almost both companies went bankrupt. Frankly, 2008 was a tough year. It took us 4 attempts just to get to orbit with Falcon 1. But a lot of times people would tell me this joke, like, how do you make a small fortune in the rocket industry? You start with a large one, is the punchline. And I was like, okay, I already heard that joke 12,000 times. Anyway, and it almost came true. We just barely made it there, that 4th launch of Falcon 1. That's all the money we had for that 4th launch. And then, and that wasn't even enough to save the company. We also then had to win the NASA cargo resupply contract.
So that came a little after, a little bit later, or towards the end of 2008. Those are the two key things that saved SpaceX. Otherwise, we would have, not made it. So, hey, I think those doubters were, their probability assessment was correct. But fortunately, Beta smiled upon us and brought us to this day. Unfortunately, one does have to be focused on the short term and money coming in when creating a company, because otherwise the company will die. So I think that a lot of times people think like creating a company is going to be fun. I would say it's not. It's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you have like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problem in the company, the most pernicious and painful problem. So I wouldn't say I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it, and have a fairly high pain threshold. And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And there's some truth to that. The staring into the abyss part is that you're going to be constantly facing the extermination of the company, because most startups fail. It's like 90%, arguably 99% of startups fail. So, that's the staring into the abyss part. You're constantly saying, okay, if I don't get this right, the company will die. It can be quite stressful. And then the eating glass part is you've got to do the problems. You've got to work on the problems that the company needs you to work on, not the problems you want to work on. And so that's you end up working on problems that you'd really wish you weren't working on. And so that's the eating glass part. And that goes on for a long time.
So how do you keep your focus on the big picture when you're constantly faced with, we could be out of business in a month?
Well, it's just a very small percentage of mental energy is on the big picture. Like you know where you're generally heading for, and the actual path is going to be some sort of zigzaggy thing in that direction. And try not to deviate too far from the path that you want to be on, but you're going to have to do that to some degree. But I don't want to diminish the. I mean, I think the profit motive is a good one if the rules of an industry are properly set up. So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with profit. In fact, profit just means that people are paying you more for whatever you're doing than you're spending to create it. That's a good thing. and if that's not the case, then you'll be out of business, and rightfully so. Because you're not adding enough value. Well, I think that the way that we currently do education is wrong, and when you see something like the Khan Academy and so forth, I think that's probably going in the right direction. I mean, generally you want education to be like as close to a video game as possible, like a good video game. Like, you do not need to tell your kid to play video games. They will play video games on autopilot all day. So if you can make it interactive and engaging, then you can make education far more compelling and far easier to do. So I think that's how it should be, and it shouldn't be that you've got like these grades where people move in lockstep, and so everyone goes through, goes like normally, we'll go through English, math, science, and so forth from like 5th grade to 6th grade to 7th grade, like it's an assembly line. But people are not objects on an assembly line. That's a ridiculous notion. People learn and are interested in different things at different paces. So you really want to disconnect the whole grade level thing from the subjects. Allow people to progress at the fastest pace that they can or are interested in each subject. Well, I think part of the problem, the reason people aren't as excited about space is that we haven't been pushing the frontier as much. And so you can only watch the same movie so many times before it gets a little boring. And you know, in the 60s and early 70s, we were really pushing the frontier of human spaceflight. And obviously those landing on the moon is regarded as one of the greatest achievements of humanity, of arguably of life itself. And even though only a handful of people went to the moon, vicariously we all went there. Well, at least I wasn't alive at the time, so, but retrospectively. And you know, and it was just one of those really inspiring things that I think made everyone glad to be, you know, human. You know, it's like the things that they're bad things humanity does, and they're good things, and this is one of the good things. And I do think it's important that we have these inspiring things that make you glad to get up in the morning, and glad to be a member of the human race. And we need to push that frontier. And I think the great goal we should be trying to pursue is trying to make life make life multiplanetary. Mm-hmm. So to establish a self-sustaining and growing civilization on another planet, Mars being the only realistic possibility, and I think that would just be one of the greatest things humanity could ever try to do. And we're focused on, like I said, it is important to have the objective be right. That's why I was talking so much about the importance of making Mars a self-sustaining, building a self-sustaining city on Mars. If that's the objective, then obviously, you know, just putting some satellites in orbit that's not important. You have to achieve full and rapid reusability. I emphasize full and rapid. Reusability is only relevant to the degree it's rapid and complete. And then you also have to do orbital refilling. This is essential as well. And then propellant production on Mars, also essential. So, you know, and with that as the goal, then, you know, that means that creates, I think, a good forcing function for radical innovation, because in the absence of radical innovation, we have no chance of meeting that goal. Whereas if our goal was simply, you know, defeat Lockheed and Boeing or something like that, we would probably achieve. You've already done it. Well, that really wasn't even a thing, you know. Yeah. I wish it was. They're not really trying to do, not even trying to do reusability, which is bizarre because they make planes that are reusable. So, I mean, if they talk to if they talk to one of their customers, buy us a Lockheed fighter jet or a Boeing aircraft, like, hey, we're going to sell you a 737 that can be used once, and it's not 737 Max. But that turns out that was a single-use airplane at times. But it really it would be an absurd thing for them to sell a single-use aircraft, but they feel quite comfortable selling a single-use rocket. And anyway, but if our goal was simply we're going to be the leaders in launching the conventional satellites that exist, we would probably approach that on a sort of a logarithmic basis, where you'd get there and you'd sort of slowly make progress towards doing 10 launches a year, 12 launches a year, and while they do 6 or something like that. I don't know. But since the goal is, hey, we need to make life multiplanetary before it's too late, and time really matters. So it's like we're shooting for Mars, not just the moon. It's not let's shoot for the moon, shoot for Mars. And then these competitive things are kind of small things along the way. Unless somebody else is shooting for Mars, they will not be competitive with something as pedestrian as launching a few satellites into Earth orbit. Yeah, I think just generally the path to leadership should not be through basically MBA business school situation. It's like it should be kind of work your way up, do useful things, and and there's a bit too much of somebody goes to a high-profile MBA school and then kind of parachutes in as the leader, but they don't actually know how things work. They can be good at, say, PowerPoint presentations or something like that, and they can present well, but they don't actually know how things work because they do not, they parachute in instead of like working their way out.
Yeah, they never went through an apprenticement, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, they're kind of like just not aware of what's really needed for to make great products. So, I mean, I don't want to trash MBAs too much here, and I actually do have a dual undergrad, Wharton undergrad, and physics at UPenn. So, so I have like, I have direct exposure to business school, and I went, to do undergrad business school with physics, but and I was a teaching assistant for 2 semesters, and I graded MBAs and undergrads. But I think it's just a little bit too much. Like people look at MBA school as like I want to parachute into being the boss instead of earning it, and like I don't think that's good.
When you were in college and developing these skills, you wanted to do some things that were of benefit to humanity. Why did you think that?
Well,
because not everyone does.
Yeah, no. I guess it was I had sort of an existential crisis of like, what does it all mean, and what's the meaning? What's the meaning of life? And
was this 3 a.m. over a beer, or this was more serious?
Probably goes back to high school, I guess. I don't want to give a laboriously long answer, but I was I had sort of a dark childhood. It wasn't good. Probably partially brought on by reading some of the philosophers. Like, don't ever read Schopenhauer and Nietzsche if you're 14. It's not good.
Yeah, or Ayn Rand either.
Yeah. So I was just trying to figure out what does it all mean. And actually, when I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I think is a great work of philosophy, that sort of highlighted the point that very often the issue is understanding what questions to ask. And if you can properly frame the question, then the answer is the easy part. So I thought things that expand the scope and scale of the human consciousness and allow us to better ask questions and achieve greater enlightenment, those were good things. And so that's sort of what can we do that's going to most likely lead to that outcome. I had a lot of friends of mine try to talk me out of starting a rocket company because they thought it was crazy. And one friend of mine made me watch a video of rockets blowing up. And there were just lots of people that thought it was a really crazy idea, and there was some people that had tried to start rocket companies, not succeeded, and they tried to talk me out of it. And but the thing is that the premise for talking me out of it was, well, we think you're going to lose the money that you invest. I was like, well, that was my expectation anyway, so I don't really mind if I lose. I mean, not mind, but I mean, it's not like I was trying to figure out the rank-ordered best way to invest money, and on that basis, chose space.
Right.
It's not like that's. I thought, wow.
You weren't looking at like money market bonds, AAA bonds,
exactly.
rocket company.
Like
you weren't
I could
like
do real estate. Invest in shoemaking, anything. And whoa, space is highest ROI. That is not what that wasn't the premise. I just thought that it was important that humanity expand beyond Earth, and we weren't doing that. So maybe there was something I could do to kind of spur that on.
If you want another amazing Elon Musk video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
I think it's also important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. So the normal way that we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. We're doing this because it's like something else that was done.